The rain lashed against the windows of Lincoln High like a relentless barrage, each drop exploding into 1,000 shimmering fragments before streaking down the glass. I really should have left hours ago, but the formidable stack of ungraded art projects on my desk seemed to mock me with every glance I cast at the steadily ticking clock. Here I was, 26 years old, spending yet another Friday night alone in an echoing, empty school building, surrounded by a chaotic gallery of watercolor disasters and charcoal smudges that bore little resemblance to the Renaissance masterpieces I'd so optimistically assigned. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered erratically, casting long, eerie shadows that danced across the classroom walls, where my students' creative, or not-so-creative, endeavors hung in neat, hopeful rows. Monet's water lilies reimagined by hormonal teenagers, Picasso's cubism filtered through the ever-present lens of social media addiction. At least they tried, which was more than I could say for the school board's perpetually faltering efforts to keep this place adequately funded. I gathered the last of the projects, meticulously stacking them before shoving them into my worn, familiar leather bag. The mundane sound echoed unnaturally, amplified in the profound silence. Empty schools possessed a unique kind of quietness, an almost palpable pressure that seemed to press against your eardrums, making every tiny rustle or creak feel disproportionately loud and vaguely menacing. My heels clicked a rhythmic, lonely rhythm against the polished linoleum as I made my way toward the main exit, passing endless rows of battered lockers and bulletin boards still proclaiming homecoming dates that had long since passed. The main hallway stretched before me, a long, dim tunnel illuminated only by the emergency lighting that bathed everything in a sickly, amber glow. I was fumbling with my keys at the front door, the metal cold and unfamiliar in my trembling fingers, when I heard it. A sharp, distinct crack, like a tree branch snapping under immense pressure. Then another, and another. Gunshots. My blood instantly turned to ice, freezing in my veins. The sounds were unmistakably coming from the parking lot, slightly muffled by the torrential storm, but terrifyingly clear. I instinctively pressed myself flat against the cold wall beside the door, my heart hammering so violently against my ribs that I was certain its frantic beat would betray my presence to whatever horror was unfolding outside. Through the narrow, rain-streaked window, I could vaguely discern the shadows of several figures moving swiftly between parked cars. The sheets of rain blurred everything, yet I could still make out the sleek, dark outlines of expensive vehicles, elegant and predatory, like beasts of prey waiting in the dark, stormy night. Another shot rang out, sharper this time. A body fell to the ground with a sickening thud. I bit down hard on my knuckle, stifling a choked cry, the metallic taste of my own blood filling my mouth. This couldn't be happening. Not here. Not at my school. Not on a random Friday night when I should have been safely at home, grading papers and indulging in leftover Chinese food. The figures outside now moved with a chilling sense of purpose, dragging something heavy toward one of the dark cars. In a brief, momentary flash of illumination from a cell phone screen, I caught a glimpse of a face. Sharp, aristocratic cheekbones, eyes as cold and unforgiving as winter ice, and an expression of utter indifference as he casually wiped his hands on what appeared to be an expensive, silk handkerchief. My mind screamed at me to run. Every primal instinct urged me to flee, to find somewhere safe, to call the police. But my legs felt as if they were suddenly encased in concrete, and my hands shook so uncontrollably that my keys slipped from my grasp. They hit the polished floor with a metallic clatter that seemed to echo, deafeningly, through the entire, silent building. The sudden sound brought everything to an abrupt halt. The figures outside instantly froze. I watched in paralyzed horror as that same cold, chiseled face slowly, deliberately, turned toward the school building. Even through the blurring curtain of rain and the deepening darkness, I could feel his gaze, searching, hunting. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't think beyond the single, terrifying realization that I had just witnessed a murder. And now, the killer knew someone was watching. I desperately needed to call 911. Needed to get help. Needed to do something other than stand there, frozen like a deer caught in headlights. But as I reached for my phone, my purse slipped from my shoulder, its contents spilling across the floor with a sound that echoed like thunder in the suffocating silence. That was when I heard the footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Drawing closer to the building. I ran. My heels slipped dangerously on the slick, polished floor as I sprinted down the long hallway, past the rows of empty classrooms and darkened offices. I needed somewhere to hide. Somewhere they wouldn't think to look. The bathroom. The women's bathroom at the far end of the building. It had a lock. And maybe, just maybe, they wouldn't consider such an obvious, mundane place. I burst through the door, immediately turning the deadbolt with a desperate click, pressing my back against the cold, unyielding metal as I fought to regain my breath. The bathroom was small, cramped, with just 3 stalls and a row of sinks beneath a cracked, discolored mirror. The harsh, flickering fluorescent lighting made everything look sickly and pale. I could hear them now, moving through the building, doors opening and closing with methodical precision, footsteps echoing off the tiled walls. They were searching, systematically, room by room. I slipped into the very last stall and locked it behind me, then climbed onto the toilet seat, pulling my feet up so they wouldn't be visible from below. My phone, when I checked it, showed no signal. Of course. The school was old, built like a veritable fortress, and self-service had always been notoriously spotty here. The bathroom door handle slowly turned. My heart stopped dead in my chest. The deadbolt would hold, wouldn't it? It had to. I pressed a trembling hand over my mouth, muffling my ragged breathing, listening intently as someone tested the door more forcefully, then, silence. I waited, counting the agonizing seconds, praying with every fiber of my being that they had moved on. 1 minute. 2. 3. Then, without warning, the lights went out. In the absolute, suffocating darkness, I heard the soft, precise click of the lock being picked. Professional. Efficient. Terrifying. The door opened, swinging inward with barely a whisper of sound. I know you're here. The voice was low, controlled, carrying the faintest trace of an accent I couldn't quite place. Italian, perhaps. You saw something you shouldn't have seen. I held my breath, pressing myself even harder against the cold stall wall as if I could somehow merge with it, disappear into the very plaster. I'm not going to hurt you, he continued, his footsteps moving slowly, deliberately, across the tiled floor. But we need to talk about what you witnessed, about what happens now. He was so close. Close enough that I could hear the soft rustle of expensive fabric as he moved. You can come out now, or I can come find you. Your choice. The silence stretched between us, taut and dangerous as a razor wire. I could feel his presence in the oppressive darkness, patient, immovable, utterly predatory. This was not a man who made idle threats. Slowly, on legs that trembled violently, I unlocked the stall door and stepped out into the black, suffocating void of the bathroom. A blinding beam of light instantly hit my face, momentarily disorienting me. As my eyes struggled to adjust, I found myself staring at a man who looked as though he had stepped directly out of a Renaissance painting, dark, perfectly styled hair despite the rain, sharp, chiseled features carved from marble, and eyes the color of winter ice that seemed to pierce straight through me, seeing every secret. He was beautiful in the way that truly dangerous things often are, deadly, compelling, and utterly terrifying. Valentina Costa, he said, and my blood instantly turned to ice water. He knew my name. 26 years old, art teacher, lives alone in apartment 3B on Maple Street. Parents died in a car accident 8 years ago. Left you with $30,000 in debt that you're still paying off. How do you? I make it my business to know these things. He stepped closer, and I caught the distinct scent of expensive cologne, subtly mingled with something metallic, blood. The question is, Miss Costa, what am I going to do with you now? I couldn't speak, couldn't think, could barely even stand upright. You saw something tonight. Something that could be problematic for me and my associates. That puts us both in a rather difficult position. I won't tell anyone, I whispered, my voice barely a thread. I swear I won't say anything to anyone. A ghost of a smile, chilling and devoid of warmth, crossed his lips, but it never quite reached those ice-blue eyes. I'm sure you believe that, but fear makes people do unpredictable things, and I've built my entire life on being able to predict exactly what people will do. He reached inside his tailored coat, and I instinctively flinched, bracing myself for a weapon. Instead, he pulled out a phone and made a quick, terse call in rapid Italian. When he hung up, he looked at me with an expression that might have been pity. My name is Lorenzo Santangelo, he said, his voice a low pronouncement. And I'm afraid your quiet little life just came to an end. The drive through the rain-soaked streets felt less like transportation and more like a descent into some personal hell. I sat rigidly in the back seat of Lorenzo's sleek, black sedan, my hands clasped so tightly in my lap that my knuckles had gone bone-white. The luxurious leather seats smelled of expensive cologne, a rich, sophisticated scent, but also something darker, more primal. Danger, perhaps, or even death. I couldn't quite distinguish which. Lorenzo sat directly across from me, his unsettling ice-blue eyes never leaving my face as he spoke quietly into his phone in rapid-fire Italian. Every few seconds, those predatory eyes would flick over me, systematically cataloging my fear, my mounting confusion, and my growing desperation. He was assessing me, I realized with a chill, like a piece of property he had just acquired. The city blurred past the tinted windows. Familiar neighborhoods gave way to opulent areas I'd never seen before, wealthier enclaves where people like me simply didn't belong. Where are you taking me? My voice emerged smaller than I intended, barely audible above the luxurious purr of the engine. Lorenzo ended his call with a decisive tap and slipped the phone into the inner pocket of his perfectly tailored jacket. Somewhere safe. Safe? I let out a sharp, almost hysterical laugh, a sound that grated even to my own ears. You just killed someone. You kidnapped me from my school. How is any of this safe? Something flickered in those cold eyes, amusement, perhaps, or irritation. I saved your life, Miss Costa. The man I killed tonight was there to eliminate a witness. A witness who saw too much 3 weeks ago when the Petro family decided to expand their operations into my territory. I don't understand. You will. The car turned smoothly through massive, ornate iron gates that swung open soundlessly as we approached, as if by unseen command. Beyond them stretched a long, winding driveway lined with towering, ancient oak trees, their branches creating a dense, protective canopy that blocked out what little moonlight managed to penetrate the churning storm clouds. At the very end of the drive, a mansion loomed, a structure that seemed to have sprung directly from the pages of a Gothic novel. It was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. 3 stories of pale stone and dark, brooding windows, adorned with intricate architectural details that whispered of old money and even older power. Light spilled from several windows, casting warm, golden rectangles onto the impeccably manicured lawns, but most of the sprawling house remained shrouded in deep, ominous shadow. Welcome to my home, Lorenzo said, his voice a quiet command, as the car glided to a stop beneath a covered portico. Before I could even formulate a response, my door was opened by a man in an expensive suit, who nodded respectfully to Lorenzo. Another suited figure appeared at Lorenzo's door, and I realized with a sudden chill that we were completely surrounded. Men moved through the shadows of the estate like silent phantoms, all of them armed, all of them watching me with unnerving intensity. How many people work for you? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Enough. Lorenzo stepped out of the car, then extended a hand to me. When I hesitated, his expression hardened, those cold eyes narrowing. I'm not going to ask again, Valentina. The way he pronounced my name sent an involuntary shiver down my spine. It wasn't exactly a threat, but it was absolute. Like he owned it now. Like he owned me. I took his hand, hating the way my skin tingled at the contact. His fingers were warm and unexpectedly calloused, yet surprisingly gentle as they closed around mine. He helped me from the car with the practiced courtesy of a man who had been raised with old-world manners, even as everything else about him screamed of danger. The interior of the mansion was even more breathtakingly impressive than its exterior. We entered through massive, intricately carved double doors into a foyer so vast it could have easily housed my entire apartment. Polished marble floors gleamed under the dazzling cascade of light from crystal chandeliers, and oil paintings that looked like priceless museum pieces lined the soaring walls. A sweeping staircase, its banister carved from what appeared to be dark, lustrous ebony, curved gracefully up to the second floor. "This way," Lorenzo said, his hand still resting lightly on the small of my back as he guided me deeper into the house. We passed through a succession of rooms that grew progressively more intimate, a formal living room adorned with furniture that likely cost more than I made in a year, a library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and the lingering, comforting scent of aged paper and fine leather. Finally, we reached what appeared to be his private study. The room was decidedly masculine, with dark wood paneling and sumptuous leather furniture arranged around a massive, stone fireplace. A fire crackled invitingly in the hearth, casting dancing, golden shadows across the walls. Behind an enormous desk sat rows of discreet filing cabinets, and I caught a fleeting glimpse of multiple computer monitors displaying what looked disturbingly like security feeds. "Sit," Lorenzo commanded, gesturing to one of two plush leather chairs positioned directly in front of the fireplace. I remained standing, defiant. "I want to go home." "That's not possible." "Why not?" "I told you I won't say anything about what I saw." "I swear to you." "Your word means nothing." He moved behind his desk and withdrew a thick manila folder, which he then tossed with a thud onto the heavy coffee table between us. "Your name is Valentina Elena Costa. You're 26 years old, born in Chicago, but moved to New York when you were 18 to attend art school. Your parents died in a car accident 8 years ago, leaving you with significant debt from your father's medical treatments." My blood turned to ice once more. "How do you know all that?" "You live alone in a one-bedroom apartment on Maple Street that you can barely afford. You teach art at Lincoln High School for $38,000 a year, which isn't enough to cover your living expenses, let alone pay down your student loans and your father's medical debt. You have $17,000 in credit card debt. Your car is 12 years old and needs a new transmission. And you've been eating ramen noodles for dinner 4 nights a week for the past 6 months. Each word was like a physical blow, stripping me bare. My entire pathetic life, laid out with clinical precision by this man who looked like a prince but spoke like the devil himself. You have no close friends, no romantic relationships, and the only family you have left is an elderly aunt in Florida who has dementia and doesn't even remember your name. His voice was clinical, utterly detached, as if he were simply reading a grocery list rather than dissecting my entire existence. You're completely, utterly alone in the world, Valentina, which makes you perfect for what I need. What you need? I sank into the chair, my legs suddenly unable to support my weight. Lorenzo moved around the desk with a predatory grace, settling into the chair directly across from me. The firelight played across his sharp features, making him look like something carved from marble and shadow. 3 weeks ago, you unknowingly witnessed the assassination of Vincent Torino, a member of my organization who had been feeding information to the Russian Bratva. Tonight, you witnessed me eliminating the man the Russians sent to silence you permanently. I don't understand. How did they even know I existed? Because Vincent told them about you before he died. Told them about the pretty teacher who saw him pass documents to Dmitry Petro in the parking lot of your school. The room spun around me, a dizzying whirlwind of disbelief. That's impossible. I never saw anything like that. I would have remembered. You were leaving school late that night, too. You walked past Vincent's car just as he was handing over a flash drive containing information about my shipping operations. You probably didn't think anything of it at the time, but Vincent was paranoid. He was convinced you'd seen enough to identify him later. I tried desperately to remember that night 3 weeks ago, but it was just another indistinct evening of staying late to grade papers. Had I seen something? Someone? Even if that's true, why does it matter now? Vincent is dead. I couldn't identify him to anyone. Lorenzo leaned forward, his ice-blue eyes boring into mine with an unnerving intensity. Because the Russians don't take chances. They've decided you're a liability, and they won't stop hunting you until you're dead. The chilling weight of his words settled over me like a suffocating shroud. So what happens now? A cold, calculating smile played at the corners of his mouth, a grim curve that held no warmth. Now, Valentina Costa, you disappear. Your old life ends tonight. You can't just make me disappear. People will notice I'm gone. My students, my principal. Your principal received a call an hour ago informing him that you've suffered a family emergency and will be taking an indefinite leave of absence. Your landlord has been paid 3 months' rent in advance and told you've moved out of state to care for a sick relative. Your car has been moved from the school parking lot. I stared at him in utter horror. In the span of just a few hours, he had systematically erased my entire existence with the terrifying efficiency of a man who had clearly done this many times before. The woman who was Valentina Costa no longer exists, he continued, his voice devoid of emotion. But I'm offering you something better, something more. What? He stood and moved to a dark, polished sideboard, pouring an amber liquid from a crystal decanter into 2 delicate glasses. He offered one to me, but I instinctively shook my head. Protection. Security. A life without fear or want. He took a slow, deliberate sip of what I assumed was extremely expensive whiskey. In exchange for one thing. What? Your complete obedience. The word hung in the air between us, heavy and undeniable, like a gauntlet thrown. I could see it in his eyes, the absolute certainty that I would comply, that I had no other choice. He was probably right. I won't be your prisoner. You won't be my prisoner, he agreed, his voice smooth and unsettling. You'll be my wife. The word wife hung in the air between us like a death sentence. I stared at Lorenzo Santangelo, searching his ice-blue eyes for any flicker, any sign that this was some kind of twisted, macabre joke. But there was nothing there except cold, unyielding calculation and absolute certainty. That's insane, I whispered, my voice hoarse. You can't just decide to marry someone you met an hour ago. I can do whatever I want, Valentina. That's what power means. I stood abruptly, the leather chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. No. I won't do it. You can't make me. Lorenzo remained seated, completely unfazed by my outburst, a picture of unflappable calm. He took another sip of his whiskey, studying me over the rim of the crystal glass as if I were a painting he was considering purchasing. Sit down, he said. No. The temperature in the room seemed to drop by 10 degrees. When Lorenzo finally spoke again, his voice carried the crushing weight of absolute authority. Sit down. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to flee. But where could I go? I was trapped in a lavish mansion, surrounded by armed men, miles from anywhere I knew. Slowly, reluctantly, I sank back into the chair. Better. He set down his glass and leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Let me explain something to you, cara mia. The Petro family doesn't negotiate. They don't show mercy. They don't leave loose ends. Right now, you are the loosest of loose ends. But I told you. What you told me is irrelevant. They've already decided you're a threat. The only way to keep you alive is to make you untouchable. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold despite the fire crackling merrily in the hearth. And marrying you makes me untouchable? Marriage to me makes you family. And in this world, familia is sacred. Even the Russians wouldn't dare touch the wife of Lorenzo Santangelo. The way he pronounced his own name sent another involuntary shiver down my spine, as if it were a weapon in itself. This marriage means nothing, he continued, his voice entirely matter of fact. A piece of paper, a legal shield. Nothing more. Then why marriage? Why not just, I don't know, put me in witness protection or something? Lorenzo laughed, a short, sharp sound utterly devoid of humor. Witness protection? You think the federal government can keep you safe from the Bratva? They have people everywhere, Valentina. Police. Judges. Federal agents. The only protection that means anything in this world is the kind that comes with consequences. I thought about my small apartment, my students, my simple, ordinary life that had been turned completely upside down in the span of a few terrifying hours. What if I refuse? Then you die. Tonight, tomorrow, next week, it doesn't matter when. The result will be the same. The casual, almost indifferent way he said it, like he was discussing the weather, made my stomach churn violently. You're asking me to give up everything. I'm asking you to live. A soft, discreet knock interrupted us. Lorenzo called out something in Italian, and the door opened to admit a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair pulled back in an elegant chignon. She moved with the quiet, practiced efficiency of someone long accustomed to serving powerful men. Ah, Maria. Lorenzo stood and switched effortlessly to English. This is Valentina Costa, my future wife. She'll be staying in the Rose Suite tonight. Asterisk future wife. Asterisk the words hit me like a series of physical blows. Maria's expression remained impassive, but I caught a fleeting flicker of something in her dark eyes. Sympathy, perhaps, or pity. Of course, Mr. Santangelo. Shall I prepare something for Miss Costa to eat? Yes. And have Sophia bring up some appropriate clothing for tomorrow. His gaze swept over my simple teacher's outfit with obvious distaste. We have a wedding to plan. Wedding? I shot to my feet again, my voice rising in incredulity. Wait just a minute. I haven't agreed to anything. Lorenzo's attention returned to me, and suddenly the air in the room felt thin and dangerously charged. Haven't you? No, I haven't. I lifted my chin, trying to project a confidence I was far from feeling. I need time to think about this. Time is a luxury you don't have. One night. Give me one night to process this insanity. For a long moment, he simply stared at me, his gaze unreadable. Then, incredibly, his lips curved into something that might have been amusement. You have spirit. I like that. Is that a yes? One night, he agreed, a chilling glint in his eyes. But understand this, Valentina. Tomorrow morning, you will walk down that aisle and become my wife, Valentina, or you will die. There are no other choices. Maria cleared her throat, a soft, almost apologetic sound. Miss Costa, if you would be so kind as to follow me. I turned my head for one last look at Lorenzo, imprinting every detail of his sharp features and cold, calculating eyes into my memory. Tomorrow, this formidable man would become my husband. The sheer weight of that realization made my head spin. One more thing, he called out just as I reached the heavy oak door, his voice cutting through the air. Don't even think about trying to leave. My men have explicit orders to stop you, by whatever means necessary. The Rose Suite, as Maria informed me, was located on the second floor of the sprawling mansion, down a long hallway lined with imposing oil paintings, works of art that surely cost more than most people's entire homes. Maria opened a door, revealing a room that seemed plucked directly from the pages of a luxurious fairy tale. The walls glowed with a soft, blush pink hue, and an enormous four-poster bed, draped in shimmering silk curtains and piled high with lavish pillows, dominated the space. French doors beckoned towards a private balcony, offering a panoramic view of the estate's meticulously kept gardens, while a magnificent marble fireplace crackled gently with a welcoming warmth. "The bathroom is through there," Maria said, gesturing to another door. "I'll have Sophia bring up some clothes shortly." "Is there anything specific you require?" I wanted to laugh, a desperate, hysterical sound that might have cracked the elegant silence. What I truly needed was to awaken from this horrifying nightmare. What I needed was my simple, uncomplicated old life back. What I needed was for this entire surreal ordeal to simply vanish, proving it was all some terrible mistake. "No," I managed to say instead, my voice barely a whisper. "Thank you." After Maria's soft footsteps faded, I found myself aimlessly wandering the opulent room, my fingers trailing over expensive fabrics and my eyes admiring artwork that legitimately belonged in world-class museums. It was breathtakingly beautiful, undeniably luxurious, yet it felt exactly like the most exquisitely designed, elegant prison cell in the world. I tried the French doors, but they were, predictably, locked tight. The windows were sealed shut. Even the ornate telephone on the nightstand offered no connection. When I picked up the receiver, it was utterly dead. A soft knock at the door made me jump, my nerves already frayed. A young woman entered, her arms laden with clothing and several boxes. "Hello, Miss Costa. I'm Sophia." She possessed the same dark, intelligent eyes as Maria, but appeared to be in her 20s. "I brought some things for you to try on." She meticulously laid out dress after dress on the vast bed, silk, cashmere, designer labels I recognized from glossy fashion magazines. The boxes held an array of shoes, delicate lingerie, sparkling jewelry, literally everything a soon-to-be Mafia wife could possibly require. "How did you know my size?" I asked, a faint irony in my voice. Sophia simply smiled, a knowing glint in her eyes. "Mr. Santangelo is very thorough." Of course, he was. The man had probably known my precise measurements, my preferences, my entire life story, long before I even knew his name, perhaps even before I truly knew I existed. After Sophia departed, I ran a luxurious bath in the enormous marble tub, sinking into water that released the soothing scent of expensive essential oils. I tried desperately not to think about tomorrow, about the inevitability, but my mind wouldn't stop racing, a whirlwind of fear and disbelief. Lorenzo Santangelo. I rolled the name around in my mouth, tasting its foreignness, testing its immense weight. 32 years old, I'd gleaned from snatches of his phone conversations. Handsome in a dark, compelling way that made my breath catch, despite every terrifying circumstance. Dangerous in a manner that should have utterly paralyzed me with fear. Instead, I found my traitorous mind drifting back to specific moments, the way his ice-blue eyes had sparked with genuine amusement when I dared to challenge him, the subtle, almost imperceptible softening in his voice when he'd called me cara mia, the careful, almost tender way he'd helped me from the car, as if I were something incredibly precious and fragile. "This marriage means nothing," he'd declared, but something unspoken in his intense gaze, a fleeting flicker, had hinted at a vastly different truth. I lingered in the bath until the water turned tepid, then reluctantly climbed out, wrapping myself in a soft silk robe. I settled by the window, gazing out at the vast, manicured grounds. Men in dark suits patrolled the perimeter, their stoic presence a chilling, constant reminder that I was, unequivocally, trapped. But was I truly? The honest, unsettling answer was that I'd been trapped long before this night. Trapped by suffocating debt, by a profound loneliness, by a life that felt as though it were slowly, painstakingly suffocating me. At least this gilded cage was undeniably beautiful. And at least Lorenzo Santangelo looked at me as if I was more than just a forgettable schoolteacher living paycheck to paycheck. The thought was undeniably dangerous. I knew this man was a killer, a notorious criminal. Someone who existed in a world I could barely begin to comprehend. Yet, when he'd uttered my name, when he'd studied me with those piercing ice-blue eyes, I had felt more vibrantly, terrifyingly alive than I had in years. Tomorrow, I would become Valentina Santangelo. The name felt alien on my tongue, and the thought should have horrified me, propelled me into a frantic panic. Instead, as I slowly drifted off to sleep in the enormous, luxurious bed, I found myself contemplating something else entirely, what it would truly be like to belong to someone as powerful, as utterly compelling as Lorenzo. What it would be like to genuinely matter to a man like him, to be his wife, even if he insisted the marriage meant nothing. But deep down, in a quiet, unacknowledged corner of my heart, a dangerous intuition whispered, it would mean everything. The morning light, filtered through the silk curtains, cast everything in a soft, golden hue that, by all rights, should have been beautiful. Instead, it felt deeply ominous. I woke with a disorienting lurch, momentarily uncertain of my surroundings, before memory slammed into me with brutal force. Today was my wedding day. My wedding to a man I had met less than 24 hours ago, a man whose very profession was taking human lives. A soft, polite knock interrupted my spiraling thoughts. Sophia entered, balancing a breakfast tray and with what looked like garment bags draped elegantly over her arm. "Good morning, Mrs. Santangelo," she said, offering a small, deferential smile. Mrs. Santangelo. The name, spoken aloud, sent an involuntary chill tracing down my spine. "I'm not married yet." "You will be in 3 hours," she responded simply. My stomach lurched, a sickening wave of nausea. Sophia placed the tray on the small, ornate table by the window and carefully hung the garment bags in the spacious walk-in closet. "Mr. Santangelo asked me to inform you that the ceremony will be small and private," she explained. "Just family and close associates." "How many people?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Perhaps 20, she replied. 20 strangers, I thought, watching me pledge my life to Lorenzo Santangelo. The horrifying realization made my hands tremble visibly as I reached for the coffee cup. "What about my family?" The words, raw with an unbidden desperation, slipped out before I could censor them. Sophia's expression softened, a brief flash of genuine pity. "I'm sorry, Miss Costa. Mr. Santangelo said there wasn't time to arrange for guests from your side." Of course, there wasn't. Because I didn't really have anyone left to invite anyway. The stark, desolate realization hit me like a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs. I was about to be married, utterly alone, with not a single soul present who genuinely cared for me. After Sophia departed, I picked half-heartedly at the breakfast, attempting to calm my frantically racing heart. Through the window, I could see men meticulously setting up chairs in what appeared to be a lush garden behind the mansion. White roses and delicate baby's breath adorned a romantic archway, making it look precisely like something from a dream or a fairy tale. If I had been given the chance to design my own wedding, it might have looked exactly like this. The thought was insidious, dangerous, and I forcefully pushed it away. At precisely 10 o'clock, Maria knocked and entered, accompanied by 2 other women I hadn't met. One carried a professional makeup kit, the other a collection of intricate hairstyling tools. "Time to get ready," Maria announced, her voice efficient. The next 2 hours dissolved into a blur of meticulous preparation. My hair was styled into an elegant updo, soft curls artfully framing my face. My makeup was applied with the exquisite skill of a professional artist, subtle, enhancing, and utterly flawless. When they finally stepped back, I barely recognized the poised, beautiful stranger staring back at me from the mirror. "Now for the dress," Maria said, her tone brimming with anticipation. She unzipped one of the garment bags, revealing a gown that quite literally stole my breath away. It was crafted from ivory silk, simple yet exquisitely elegant, featuring a fitted bodice and a flowing skirt that gracefully fell to my ankles. The neckline was modest, yet somehow managed to be subtly sensual, and delicate lace sleeves completed the ethereal look. "It's beautiful," I whispered, genuinely moved. "Mr. Santangelo selected it personally," Maria murmured as she helped me step into the gown. "He has excellent taste." The dress fit perfectly, molding to my form as if it had been custom-made for me, which, knowing Lorenzo's meticulous thoroughness, it almost certainly had been. As Maria painstakingly fastened the tiny buttons up the back, I caught a full glimpse of myself in the ornate, full-length mirror. I looked like a bride. A real bride. Glowing and beautiful, ready to marry the man she loved. The illusion was so utterly perfect, so convincing, that it made my chest ache with a profound, confusing sadness. A sharp knock at the door interrupted the poignant moment. "Come in," Maria called out. The door swung open, and Lorenzo stepped inside. He was dressed in an impeccably tailored black tuxedo, a vision that made him look like a formidable prince from some dark, dangerous fairy tale. His piercing ice-blue eyes swept over me, taking in every detail of my appearance. For a fleeting moment, something profound flickered in their depths, something unreadable yet intense. "Beautiful," he said, the single word delivered with a soft, surprising simplicity. That one word sent a shocking wave of heat rushing through me. No one, not ever, had looked at me the way Lorenzo was looking at me right now, as if I were something utterly precious, flawlessly perfect, and entirely, irrevocably his. "Leave us," he commanded softly, his gaze never once breaking from mine, dismissing the women with a subtle nod. Once we were alone, he took a step closer, his presence immediately filling the room. From his jacket pocket, he withdrew a small, exquisite velvet box. "These were my mother's," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle as he opened it to reveal a pair of elegant pearl earrings, each surrounded by a halo of glittering diamonds. "She died when I was 16. The admission was unexpected, a brief, startling crack in his meticulously controlled facade. I found myself wondering, in that moment, what she must have been like, this woman who had raised a son capable of being both a brutal killer and, in this strange, surreal moment, a surprisingly tender groom. "They're beautiful," I managed to say, my voice a little breathless. He moved behind me, his proximity sending a curious thrill through me, and delicately fastened the earrings. His fingers brushed against my neck as he worked, the light contact sending unexpected shivers down my spine. "There's something else," he murmured, from another pocket. This time, he produced a pistol. Small, silver, almost impossibly elegant in its deadly design. "This is for you." I stared at the weapon in utter horror. "I can't. I don't know how to use that." "You'll learn," he stated, his voice firm. "From this moment on, you'll never be without protection." He expertly slipped the gun into a hidden pocket within the folds of my wedding dress, a pocket I hadn't even realized was there. The Petrovs are not known for their honor. Being my wife makes you a target as much as it makes you untouchable. The unexpected weight of the cool pistol against my hip was a chilling, constant reminder of the perilous world I was now irrevocably entering. "Lorenzo, it's time," Maria's voice called from the doorway. He offered me his arm, a gesture both formal and possessive. We walked through the mansion's opulent corridors in silence, the rhythmic click of my heels against the polished marble floors echoing softly, the train of my silk dress whispering behind me. Through the tall, arched windows, I could see the guests already assembled in the sun-drenched garden, men in expensive, tailored suits with faces that seemed carved from stone, and a handful of women who watched our approach with undisguised, almost avid curiosity. The officiant awaited us beneath the magnificent, rose-covered archway, an elderly man with remarkably kind eyes who looked utterly out of place amidst the assembled criminals. When he offered me a gentle, reassuring smile, I felt a fraction of my terror ease. Lorenzo and I took our positions, and the ceremony, the surreal culmination of this terrifying day, began. The traditional vows washed over me like an inescapable tide: love, honor, cherish, till death do us part. Promises I had once dreamed of making to someone who genuinely loved me, now being spoken to a man who had explicitly stated this marriage meant absolutely nothing. But when Lorenzo slipped the ring onto my finger, a stunning diamond that caught the afternoon light, scattering dazzling rainbows across my ivory dress, his touch was surprisingly, unexpectedly gentle. And when his piercing ice-blue eyes met mine as he spoke his vows, there was a fleeting, almost imperceptible something in their depths that looked unsettlingly like tenderness. "You may kiss the bride," the officiant announced, his voice a gentle benediction. Lorenzo's hands rose to frame my face, his thumbs brushing across my cheekbones with infinite, surprising care. For a suspended moment, we simply looked at each other, and I could discern a silent question in the depths of his intense gaze. Then, his lips touched mine. The kiss was soft, almost hesitant, as if he were giving me the unspoken choice to pull away. But instead of recoiling, I found myself leaning into him, my hands instinctively rising to rest against his broad chest. His heart hammered as rapidly as my own. When we finally broke apart, his forehead rested against mine for just a fleeting second. "Mrs. Santangelo," he whispered, so quietly that only I could hear, the name a possessive caress. The sudden burst of applause shattered the intimate spell, harshly reminding me that we had an audience. I turned to face our guests, Lorenzo's strong arm possessively around my waist, and attempted to conjure the smile of a happy bride. But as I looked out at the hardened faces of the men who worked for my new husband, men who killed, stole, and committed far worse atrocities for his approval, I realized with crystalline clarity that my old life hadn't just ended last night in that grimy school bathroom. It had ended the very moment I'd uttered "I do" to Lorenzo Santangelo. Now, I belonged to him, and he belonged to a world where violence was currency, and loyalty was bought with blood. The terrifying question that echoed in my mind was, what kind of woman would I have to become in order to survive it? 3 weeks into our honeymoon on the breathtaking Amalfi Coast, I finally, brutally understood what Lorenzo had meant when he declared this marriage was just business. We occupied the same sprawling villa, shared elegant meals on the sun-drenched terrace overlooking the cerulean Mediterranean, and even slept in the same enormous, luxurious bed. Yet, he treated me like an exquisitely expensive piece of art he'd acquired, beautiful to look at, meticulously protected, but never truly touched, never truly claimed. The villa itself was a masterpiece of classic Italian architecture, perched dramatically on cliffs that plunged into the azure waters below. Every morning, I woke to find Lorenzo already gone, either immersed in business calls in his secluded study or meeting with men who arrived in sleek, powerful boats, their voices hushed and urgent in rapid Italian. Every evening, he would return to find me quietly reading on the terrace or painting watercolors of the stunning coastline, and we would share dinner, engaging in polite, distant conversation that skirted any true intimacy. "You're an excellent cook," I ventured one evening, watching him prepare fresh pasta with the innate skill of someone who had done it his entire life. His movements were precise, almost meditative, as he worked the delicate dough with strong, capable hands I had seen hold both deadly guns and fragile flowers with equal, surprising care. "My mother taught me, before she died." His hands continued to move efficiently, rolling the dough with practiced ease. "She always said a man who couldn't feed himself was destined to starve or marry badly." It was one of the few personal details he had ever shared, and I found myself treasuring it like a precious, unexpected secret. "What was she like?" I asked, leaning against the cool marble kitchen counter, observing his focused movements. The late afternoon sun streamed through the windows, catching the hidden gold in his dark hair, and I found myself instinctively memorizing the sight. Lorenzo's hand stilled for just a moment. Strong. Beautiful. She loved my father with a devotion that bordered on obsession. It killed her in the end. "What do you mean?" I pressed, my voice soft. "She couldn't live without him after he was murdered. She took her own life 3 months later." His voice was unnervingly matter-of-fact, yet I caught the subtle tension in his shoulders, the almost imperceptible clench of his jaw. The raw, unvarnished pain in his words made my chest ache with an unexpected sympathy. Without thinking, I reached out, my fingers instinctively seeking to touch his hand, but he pulled away, swiftly, before our skin could make contact. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "Don't be," he replied, his voice regaining its usual controlled cadence. It taught me a valuable lesson about the dangers of emotional attachment. The message was chillingly clear: don't get too close. Don't expect too much. Don't mistake this convenient arrangement for something real, for something heartfelt. But late at night, when he believed I was deeply asleep, I would feel the subtle dip of the mattress as he sat on the edge of the bed, his silent presence a warm, protective weight in the encompassing darkness. Sometimes, his fingers would almost brush against my hair before he'd invariably catch himself and pull away. And sometimes, I would hear him whisper my name, a soft, almost imperceptible sound, like a secret prayer he wasn't allowed to utter. Those stolen, intimate moments, despite everything, gave me dangerous, fragile hope. During the days, I explored the opulent villa and its sprawling grounds like a beautiful, gilded prisoner. The staff were unfailingly kind, yet perpetually distant, addressing me with the careful, almost reverent respect reserved solely for the boss's wife. I painted the sweeping, majestic views of the coastline, lost myself in books from Lorenzo's impressively extensive library, and constantly tried not to dwell on the stark reality that I was utterly cut off from everything and everyone I had ever known. The profound isolation should have, by all accounts, driven me to madness. Instead, I found myself studying Lorenzo with an intensity akin to how I once taught my students about the Renaissance masters. Every subtle gesture, every fleeting expression, every meticulously controlled word fascinated me. He was a man built of stark contradictions, capable of breathtaking, brutal violence one moment, and displaying unexpected tenderness the next, ruthless and calculating in business, yet surprisingly gentle when he believed no one was observing him. I began to understand that the emotional distance he meticulously maintained wasn't merely about self-protection. It was about absolute control. Lorenzo Santangelo controlled every facet of his world with military precision, and that, I realized, extended to his own complex feelings. But I was beginning to suspect that his feelings for me were becoming increasingly, dangerously difficult to control. On our 21st day in Italy, the fragile peace shattered. Everything changed in an instant. I was painting serenely on the terrace when I heard the unmistakable sound of multiple boats approaching at terrifyingly high speed. The mechanical roar of powerful engines sliced through the peaceful afternoon calm like a sharpened knife. Lorenzo emerged from his study, tension radiating from every taut line of his body. He spoke rapid, urgent Italian into his phone, his eyes scanning the horizon with military-grade precision. "Get inside," he commanded, his voice carrying in raw authority I had never heard from him before. "What's happening?" I cried out, my voice trembling. "The Petrovs," he bit out, his jaw clenched. "They've found us." Pure, visceral terror flooded my system. In the idyllic bubble of our honeymoon, I had almost forgotten about the Russians. Almost forgotten that we were being relentlessly hunted by people who wanted me dead for something I had witnessed weeks ago in a mundane school parking lot. Lorenzo grabbed my arm, his grip firm but surprisingly careful, mindful of my body even in his desperate urgency, and pulled me violently toward the villa's interior. "There's a safe room behind the wine cellar. I need you to." The first gunshot erupted, shattering the fragile afternoon calm into 1,000 pieces. Lorenzo brutally shoved me to the ground as a hail of bullets strafed across the terrace, shredding my easel and sending jagged chunks of stone flying through the air like deadly confetti. My nearly completed painting of the Mediterranean sunset dissolved into mere ribbons under the merciless assault. The peaceful, sun-drenched villa transformed into an active war zone in a matter of terrifying seconds. "Stay low," Lorenzo roared, his voice cutting through the escalating chaos. He had drawn a gun from seemingly nowhere, his entire demeanor shifting with terrifying speed from distant, elegant husband to lethal, focused predator. The transformation was instantaneous, absolute, and chilling. "Can you make it to the stairs?" More gunshots erupted, this time from multiple directions. They weren't just attacking from the water, they had surrounded us on land as well. Through the deafening chaos, I could hear men shouting in harsh, urgent Russian. "Lorenzo!" I shrieked, my voice tearing as a bullet zipped so close to his head that I actually saw it singe a strand of his perfectly styled hair. His piercing ice-blue eyes met mine across the bullet-riddled terrace, and for the first time since our wedding day, I saw raw, undeniable emotion in their depths. Fear. Not for himself, but for me. "Go," he bellowed, his voice filled with desperate urgency. "Get to the safe room." But I couldn't move. My limbs felt heavy, frozen in place. I couldn't think, couldn't even begin to process that this beautiful, serene place where we had, in a strange way, been playing house, had suddenly transformed into a brutal battlefield where people were actively trying to kill us. That's when my gaze snagged on a sleek, black boat speeding directly toward our private dock. In it sat a man with chillingly pale eyes and stark, cruel Slavic features. Dmitry Petrov, I realized with a bone-deep, sickening certainty, the very Russian who wanted me dead. Even from a distance, I could see the cold, calculating satisfaction on his face as he surveyed the chaos his men had so expertly created. Lorenzo followed my gaze, and his face went completely still, a terrifying mask of grim determination. "Valentina," he breathed, the rare, familiar endearment carrying a note of genuine, raw concern that chilled me far more profoundly than the incessant gunfire. He spoke rapidly into his phone, but I could tell from the desperate tension in his expression that help was too far away. We were utterly on our own, against however many ruthless men Petrov had brought with him. "Valentina, listen to me." He crawled across the splintered stone floor, ignoring the blood seeping through his white shirt from a graze on his arm, to where I lay frozen. "In about 60 seconds, Dmitry Petrov is going to walk through that door. When he does, I need you to run. Don't look back. Don't try to help me. Just run to the safe room and lock yourself inside. I'm not leaving you." I cried, my voice fierce. "You are," he insisted, his eyes burning with an intense resolve. "Because if he gets his hands on you, he'll use you to destroy me. And then he'll kill us both anyway." The ominous sound of heavy footsteps reverberating through the villa made us both freeze. Multiple sets of heavy boots on marble floors, moving with chilling military precision. They were inside. Lorenzo pressed something cold and heavy into my trembling hands, the gun. The small, deadly pistol he'd given me on our wedding day, the one I had never for a second imagined I would actually need to use. "Remember what I taught you," he whispered, his breath warm against my ear, guiding my numb fingers. "Safety off. Aim for the center of mass. Squeeze. Don't pull the trigger." And Valentina, his voice caught, a fragile tremor. "Whatever happens, know that you gave me something I never thought I could have." "What?" I breathed. "Hope." The footsteps were growing louder, closer, accompanied by harsh, guttural Russian voices. Lorenzo kissed me then, a kiss that was hard and desperate, brimming with all the raw emotion he had meticulously held back for weeks. When he pulled away, his eyes were fierce, blazing with something that looked remarkably, terrifyingly like love. "I should have told you," he rasped, his voice thick with urgency. "This marriage, it stopped being business the moment I put that ring on your finger." Then he was gone, moving with lethal, balletic grace toward the villa's interior, deliberately drawing the attackers away from me, using his own body as bait. I heard shouting in both Russian and Italian, then an explosion of gunfire, so much gunfire that the very walls of the villa seemed to shake with the impact. But I didn't run to the safe room like he had commanded. Instead, I found my feet moving, almost instinctively, toward the escalating sound of battle, the cold gun steady in my hands, my heart pounding with a strange, fierce mixture of terror and something else entirely, something protective, utterly certain, and profoundly new. Lorenzo Santangelo was my husband. He might have married me for business, but somewhere along the way, in the quiet, dangerous moments, I had fallen in love with him. And I'd be damned if I was going to hide in a closet while he fought for our lives alone. The thought, the willingness to kill for him, to die for him, should have horrified me. But instead, in that moment of absolute chaos, it felt like the truest thing I had ever known. When I reached the villa's main room, a grim scene unfolded before me. Lorenzo was backed against the wall, bleeding from grievous wounds in his shoulder and thigh, bravely facing 3 armed Russians. Dmitry Petrov stood in the center, his pale eyes gleaming with cold satisfaction as he surveyed his cornered prey. The famous Lorenzo Santangelo, Dmitry sneered in heavily accented English. Not so powerful now, are you? Where's your pretty little wife? Go to hell, Lorenzo snarled, a raw sound of defiance, though I could clearly see the exhaustion in his posture, the way he subtly favored his injured leg. Dmitry smiled, a chilling expression utterly devoid of warmth or humanity. I think I'll find her myself after I finish with you. I have such plans for the little teacher who thought she could witness my business and live to tell about it. That's when I emerged from the encompassing shadows, gun raised, my hands miraculously steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. You found me, I said. All 4 men turned in a collective gasp of surprise, but I kept my weapon trained on Dmitry, remembering every lesson Lorenzo had taught me during our quiet evenings on the terrace. Mrs. Santangelo, Dmitry said, his smile widening into something predatory, a hint of mockery in his tone. How thoughtful of you to join us, though I must say, you're not quite what I expected from a Mafia wife. Let him go. Dmitry laughed, a harsh, grating sound like splintering glass. You think you can threaten me, little teacher? You don't have the stomach for this world. You don't have what it takes to pull that trigger. You're right, I said calmly, my voice, against all odds, steadier than I felt. 3 weeks ago, I couldn't have hurt anyone. I spent my whole life avoiding conflict, trying to help people instead of hurting them. But you made one mistake, Dmitry. And what's that? I thought about Lorenzo's gentle hands teaching me to cook. His quiet, reassuring presence in the darkness. The way he'd kissed me like I was precious and fragile and utterly worth dying for. You threatened my husband. I squeezed the trigger. The gunshot echoed through the villa like thunder, a deafening roar that ripped through the opulent space. Dmitry Petrov stumbled backward, clutching his shoulder where my bullet had found its mark. Blood seeped between his fingers as he stared at me in shock, his pale eyes wide with disbelief. You shot me, he said, as if the reality seemed to bypass his comprehension. I warned you, I replied, keeping the gun trained on him even as a tremor ran through me despite my outward composure. I told you to let him go. The remaining 2 Russians, jolted into action, swung their weapons in my direction. But Lorenzo moved with a burst of adrenaline-fueled speed that belied his wounds. In one fluid, brutal motion, he disarmed the nearest man and put a bullet in the second before they could fire a single shot. The air crackled with the renewed cacophony of gunfire, punctuated by Dmitry's guttural, pained curses in Russian. Valentina, get down! Lorenzo shouted as a fresh wave of armed figures poured into the villa from outside. I dropped behind an overturned marble table just as automatic gunfire sprayed across the room. Chunks of priceless art and splintering ancient furniture exploded around us. Through the chaos, I could see Lorenzo moving like a man possessed, a blur of determined motion, taking cover behind a stone pillar as he returned fire with deadly precision. How many more are there? I called out to him. Too many, he replied grimly, his voice tight with resolve. But I called for backup before they breached the perimeter. My men should be here soon. Should be. Pray they are. Dimitri, surprisingly still on his feet despite the deepening crimson stain on his shoulder and the visible sway from blood loss, barked orders in Russian to his men. I watched in horror as 3 more armed figures appeared at the villa's entrance, a fresh surge of dread washing over me. The odds were now impossibly stacked against us, at least 6-1. "Lorenzo Sant'Angelo," Dimitri called out, his accented voice carrying despite the gunfire. "You've caused me considerable trouble, but I'm prepared to be reasonable. Give me the woman and I'll kill you quickly." "Counter offer," Lorenzo replied, his voice, a chilling counterpoint to the mayhem, cut through the noise. "Surrender now and I'll only break half the bones in your body before I put a bullet in your head." Dimitri laughed, a mirthless bark. "Still so arrogant, even when you're bleeding to death." I looked at Lorenzo and saw that Dimitri was right. The wounds he'd sustained were worse than I'd realized. His shirt was soaked with blood, and I could see the pain etched into his face, a mask of strain, but his hands, miraculously, remained steady as he continued to return fire. "Valentina," he said quietly, reloading his weapon with the practiced, almost casual efficiency of a man born to battle. "There's something I need you to know." "What?" "The safe room has a direct line to my security team. If something happens to me, nothing's going to happen to you. If something happens," he continued firmly, his gaze unwavering, "get to that room and tell them Code Omega. They'll know what to do." "What's Code Omega?" Lorenzo's piercing ice-blue eyes locked with mine across the chaotic room, conveying an unspoken message of grim finality. "Nuclear option. It means eliminate everyone who isn't family." The weight of his words settled over me, a profound, crushing weight. He was facing the unthinkable, preparing for the possibility that we might not both survive this, that he might not survive this. "I love you," I said suddenly. The words erupted from me, raw and unfiltered, as if ripped from the depths of my soul. For a moment, everything else faded away. A profound silence enveloped us, an impossible calm amidst the storm. The gunfire, the danger, the blood, none of it mattered. There was only Lorenzo's face, his gaze, momentarily devoid of pain and calculation, widened with a look of pure wonder. "Go ahead, Toe," he whispered. "What did you say?" I said, "I love you, Lorenzo Sant'Angelo. This marriage stopped being business for me the moment you kissed me at the altar." A breathtaking transformation swept across his face, a soft smile making him look younger, gentler, revealing a glimpse of the man he could have been, untainted by this brutal world. "Ti amo Annio Camilla, I love you, too." The whir of approaching helicopter blades sliced through the tender moment. Through the villa's shattered windows, I could see black aircraft descending toward the estate, and my heart surged with a desperate, burgeoning hope. "Cavalry is here," Lorenzo said with grim but undeniable satisfaction. But Dimitri wasn't finished. With a roar of rage, he lunged from his cover, gun raised not at Lorenzo, but at me. Time seemed to slow. The world narrowed to his snarling face, his finger tightening on the trigger, the hatred burning in his pale eyes. Lorenzo moved without hesitation, a blur of selfless motion, throwing himself between us just as Dimitri fired. The bullet meant for me caught Lorenzo in the chest, and the impact sent him sprawling to the ground. "No!" I screamed, abandoning my cover to reach him. I dropped to my knees beside him, pressing my hands against the wound as warm, sticky blood poured between my fingers. "Lorenzo, stay with me. Please stay with me." His breath hitched, a shallow, ragged sound. "Valentina, don't talk. Save your strength. Help is coming." Around us, the villa, already a scene of carnage, was plunged into an even greater maelstrom as Lorenzo's men rappelled through the windows and engaged the remaining Russians. The firefight was brief but intense. I heard Dimitri's pained yelp swallowed by the din, then by an abrupt, chilling silence. When the gunfire finally stopped, the sudden cessation of sound left a vacuum, a deafening quiet. "Mrs. Sant'Angelo." A man in tactical gear approached us cautiously. His voice, though calm, held an urgent edge. "I'm Captain Martinez, Lorenzo's head of security. We need to get him to a hospital immediately." "Is it bad?" I asked, the question purely rhetorical, as I already knew the answer from the alarming amount of blood. "Bad enough, but he survived worse." Martinez spoke rapidly into his radio, calling for a medical helicopter. "Ma'am, we need to move him now." "I'm coming with you." "That's not advisable." "You should." "I'm coming with my husband," I said firmly, using the tone I reserved for unruly teenagers. "And I'm not going to ask again." Martinez looked at Lorenzo, who, his face ashen, managed a weak but firm nod of assent. "She comes," Lorenzo whispered. The helicopter ride to the hospital was the longest 20 minutes of my life. Each minute stretched into an eternity as Lorenzo drifted in and out of consciousness, his hand clutching mine with what little strength he had left. "Don't leave me," I whispered, my voice thick with unshed tears and desperation, pressing my lips to his knuckles. "I just found you. Don't you dare leave me." "Not going anywhere," he managed, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. "You shot Dmitry Petrov, my wife. Shot the head of the Russian Bratva." Despite everything, a wry, almost manic smile touched my own lips. "Is that impressive?" "Terrifying, incredibly sexy, and completely insane." He closed his eyes, a faint, contented sigh escaping him. "Perfect Mafia wife material." The doctors took him away the moment we reached the hospital, leaving me alone in a waiting room that smelled of antiseptic and fear. My clothes, still bearing the faint stains of mourning paint, were now starkly emblazoned with Lorenzo's blood. A tremor ran through my hands, mirroring the seismic shift within me, as I tried to process everything that had happened. I had killed a man today. I had shot Dmitry Petrov without hesitation when he threatened Lorenzo. The thought should have horrified me, but all I felt was a profound, almost savage satisfaction that I'd protected the man I loved. Hours passed, each ticking second in agony, before a surgeon finally emerged to find me. "Mrs. Santangelo, your husband is stable." The bullet missed his heart by inches, but we were able to repair the damage. "He's going to need extensive recovery time, but he should make a full recovery." The relief that flooded me was so intense, it stole my breath. I nearly collapsed. "Can I see him?" "He's sedated right now." "But yes, room 312. Lorenzo looked smaller in the hospital bed, diminished by the stark white sheets and the sterile surroundings, connected to machines that beeped and hummed around him. But he was breathing. He was alive. The gentle rhythm of the machines was music to my ears. I took the chair beside his bed and settled in to wait. When he finally woke 12 hours later, his eyes fluttered open, hazy with medication, but quickly found mine. "Camilla," he said, his voice, though weak and raspy, held an unmistakable warmth of relief. "You're here. Where else would I be?" I leaned forward to brush a soft kiss across his forehead. "How do you feel?" "Like I've been shot by a Russian psychopath." A wry grin touched his lips, quickly replaced by a wince of pain as he tried to shift. "But alive?" "Thanks to you." "Thanks to me, Lorenzo. You took a bullet meant for me, and I shot the man who fired it. We're even." A small, disbelieving laugh escaped me. "Is this what marriage to you is going to be like? Taking turns saving each other's lives? Is this to be the rhythm of our life together?" Lorenzo's gaze grew serious, intense. "Valentina, about what I said in the villa. That I love you. I hope you meant it because I meant what I said too." "I meant every word." His uninjured hand, surprisingly strong, reached up to cup my face. "When I married you, I told myself it was just business. A convenient arrangement, I convinced myself, solely to ensure your safety. But somewhere between our wedding day and watching you paint on that terrace, you irrevocably became my everything. Just so we're clear, I affirmed, leaning into his touch, settling more comfortably in my chair. This marriage definitely means something now. Everything, he agreed, his eyes, clear and earnest, met mine. It means everything. Outside the hospital window, the Italian sun was setting over the Mediterranean, a breathtaking panorama unfolding, streaking the horizon with vibrant hues of gold and crimson. Tomorrow, the harsh realities of our new life would soon assert themselves. There would be police reports, rival families to negotiate with, and the intricate, often brutal, mechanics of a criminal empire to manage while recovering from gunshot wounds. But in this stolen moment, none of that held sway. Tonight, all that mattered was that we were both alive, both whole in spirit, if not entirely in body, and both finally ready to admit that somewhere between a forced marriage and a mafia war, we had found something neither of us had been looking for. We had found love. 2 months later, the scars were healing, both visible and invisible. Lorenzo was finally cleared for normal activity. The doctors had been cautiously optimistic throughout his recovery, but seeing him move without wincing for the first time since Italy felt like a small, quiet miracle. We were back in New York, in the sprawling mansion that had become my home. Though it felt different now. The walls that had once seemed like a gilded cage now truly felt like a sanctuary of shared purpose and affection. Each room now resonated with the echoes of our unconventional courtship, the library where we'd shared our first real conversation, the formal study where he'd proposed an arrangement that had blossomed into something infinitely more profound. "You're staring," Lorenzo said, his voice, calm and deep, cut through my thoughts without him ever lifting his gaze from the intricate financial report spread across his desk. Even recovery hadn't slowed his formidable work ethic. "I'm admiring," I corrected, a soft smile touching my lips as I curled deeper into the plush leather armchair that had become my preferred perch during his work hours. "There's a difference." "Is there?" He finally looked up, his piercing ice-blue eyes now softened with unmistakable affection. "And what exactly are you admiring, Mrs. Santangelo?" The name, Mrs. Santangelo, still sent a delicious thrill through me. It was no longer merely a legal designation, a shield against the world, but a title I wore with burgeoning pride. "Everything," I confessed, encompassing him with my gaze. "The way you've thrown yourself back into work as if you hadn't faced death's door a mere 2 months prior. The way you still insist on making breakfast every morning even though we have 3 people who could do it for us. The way you look at me as if I were some ethereal miracle, rather than just a woman who inadvertently stumbled into the heart of the Mafia." Lorenzo laid aside his pen, his full, intense attention now fixed solely on me. "You know what I see when I look at you?" "What?" "The woman who, without a moment's hesitation, put a bullet in Dmitry Petrov when he threatened her husband. The woman who refused to hide in a safe room while I fought for our lives. The woman who made me believe in something I thought was just a fairy tale." "What's that?" "Love that's worth dying for. A love so profound, so absolute, that it transcends even death." Our tender moment was abruptly shattered by a precise knock. Maria entered with her usual impeccable efficiency. "Mr. Santangelo, there's a situation that requires your attention." The warmth in Lorenzo's eyes vanished, replaced by the familiar, chilling focus of a man accustomed to navigating treacherous waters. "What kind of situation?" "Marco has been feeding information to the Koslov family. Captain Martinez intercepted communications 20 minutes ago." Maria's words struck me like a physical blow. Marco. Lorenzo's childhood confidant, his fiercely loyal lieutenant, the man who had weathered every storm at Lorenzo's side, even through the harrowing events in Italy. A raw, visceral pain flickered across Lorenzo's features, swiftly masked by an impenetrable resolve. "How long?" Lorenzo's voice was dangerously calm, a steel trap holding back an inferno. The tension radiating from his shoulders was palpable. "At least 6 months, possibly longer." The Kozlovs have been planning a systematic, calculated strike on your shipping operations. Marco provided them with schedules, routes, security protocols. Where is he now? Detained in the warehouse on 5th Street, awaiting your orders. Lorenzo rose, a slow, deliberate movement, his hand falling instinctively to the hidden weapon beneath his jacket. Gather the senior staff. I want everyone assembled in an hour. Yes, sir. Maria paused at the door, her gaze hesitant. Sir, Mrs. Santangelo should know that the Kozlovs have specifically mentioned her in their communications. They view her as a vulnerable point, a weakness to be exploited. Another target on my back. Another family that wanted to use me to hurt Lorenzo. Instead of terror, a cold, hard anger ignited within me. Thank you, Maria, Lorenzo said, his voice tight, his command immediate. Double the security detail around the house. No one gets in or out without my personal authorization. His control, though strained, was absolute. The silence that followed Maria's departure was thick with unspoken fury. Lorenzo stared out the window at his perfectly maintained grounds, his jaw a tight knot, betraying the immense effort it took to rein in his tumultuous emotions. He was like a brother to me, he said finally, his voice low, laced with raw pain. I know. I knew Marco's significance, a bond forged in childhood that ran deeper than blood. I trusted him with everything. With you. I rose and moved to stand behind him, wrapping my arms around his waist and pressing my cheek against his rigid back, feeling the tremor of contained fury that radiated from him, a testament to his formidable will. What happens now? I asked, the question hanging in the air, heavy with unspoken consequences. Now he dies. And the Kozlovs learn what happens to people who threaten what's mine. His words were delivered with chilling finality. Far from instilling fear, his pronouncement resonated with a fierce sense of protection, a silent, unwavering vow to eradicate any threat to the life we were building. I want to be present, I stated, my voice firm. Lorenzo tensed, then slowly turned in my embrace, his eyes wide with genuine shock. What did you say? He murmured, clearly disbelieving. When you confront Marco, I reiterated, leaving no room for misunderstanding. I intend to be there. His response was immediate, absolute. Absolutely not, Valentina. It's far too dangerous. And besides. I prompted, already sensing his unspoken concern. Besides what? That I'm too delicate? Too innocent for such brutalities? I pulled away, my gaze unwavering, meeting his with a newfound steeliness. Lorenzo, I killed for you. I chose this life. I chose you. I chose to step into this world. You cannot shield me from its realities indefinitely. I can try, and I love you for it. But Marco betrayed us. He jeopardized my life, and he imperiled our marriage. I have every right to confront him, just as you do. Lorenzo's gaze searched mine for a long moment, a silent war waging in his ice-blue eyes. The protective lover wrestled with the pragmatic Mafia boss. The man who'd fallen in love with me wanted to keep me safe, sheltered from the darker realities of his business. But the Mafia boss recognized the strength in my argument, understood that I was no longer the frightened teacher he'd rescued from a school bathroom, but the fierce, newly awakened woman who had found her voice and her strength. If you come with me, he said finally, his voice low, his conditions unyielding, you follow my lead exactly. No improvisation, no heroics. No sudden moves, no impulsive acts of heroism. Understood. My affirmation was immediate, absolute. And Valentina, his hands rose to frame my face, his thumbs gently stroking my cheekbones, a gesture both tender and grave. Understand this, after tonight, there's no turning back. Once you cross this line, you will be irrevocably enmeshed, as deeply immersed in this world as I am. I cast my mind back to the woman I'd been mere months prior, isolated, adrift, virtually invisible to everyone around her. Then, I considered the woman I had become, loved, cherished, imbued with a strength I never knew I possessed, capable of lethal action to protect what was mine. I'm already there, I affirmed, my voice unwavering. I have been, Lorenzo, since the moment I uttered I do. The warehouse on 5th Street, stark and industrial, emanated an aura of grim finality, a place where stories ended, often violently. Lorenzo's men had cleared the area, creating a heavily fortified buffer zone of several blocks around the building. When our car pulled up, I could see armed figures strategically positioned on nearby rooftops, in doorways, and behind parked vehicles. This wasn't merely a confrontation, it was a brutal, public declaration. "Last chance to stay in the car," Lorenzo said, his voice low, devoid of negotiation, as we sat in the back seat, watching his men secure the perimeter. "Not happening." He nodded, a curt gesture that confirmed his expectation. "Remember what I taught you. Eyes up, shoulders back. Never let them see weakness. You're not Valentina Costa, the art teacher, anymore. You are Valentina Santangelo, my wife, and that title alone imbues you with a formidable power in this city." We entered the warehouse together, and a wave of eyes, sharp and assessing, followed our entrance. Lorenzo's men, hardened men whose gazes had witnessed countless brutalities, regarded me with a potent blend of respect and a weary, knowing caution. The legend of the Mafia wife from Italy had clearly preceded me. They knew their boss's wife was not to be underestimated. Marco was a crumpled figure, tied to a chair in the cavernous space. His face was bruised and bloodied, evidence of a discussion that had clearly been devoid of polite discourse with Martinez's men. When he saw us approaching, his gaze, desperate and haunted, darted between Lorenzo and me, and in that instant, a chilling comprehension dawned in his eyes, revealing he understood the grim significance of my presence. "Lorenzo," he said, his voice a raw croak. "I can explain." "Can you?" Lorenzo's response was chillingly calm, almost conversational, yet infinitely more menacing for its composure. "Could you possibly explain how you could betray a man who treated you like family? Or how you dared to sell information that imperiled my wife? They had my sister, the Koslovs. They seized Elena and said they'd kill her if I didn't. You came to me for help with Elena's gambling debt 6 months ago," Lorenzo cut him off, his voice a low growl of accusation. "I cleared her gambling debts, personally. $200,000, without a single question, because you were family." Marco's face crumbled into a mask of despair. "They took her again. Said the debt had accumulated interest, penalties. They demanded information, or else. So you decided to risk my life instead of hers?" Lorenzo's voice was lethal in its quietness. "I never intended it to escalate to this. I thought I could manage it, feeding them just enough to ensure Elena's safety, yet not enough to truly harm you." Lorenzo drew his gun, the metallic click of the chamber check a stark punctuation in the tense silence. "The Koslovs planned a simultaneous strike on 3 of my shipments. Its success would have crippled my operations, costing me millions and leaving me vulnerable to a hostile takeover. Was Elena's life truly worth the annihilation of everything I've meticulously built?" "She's my sister," Marco pleaded, tears welling in his eyes. "And Valentina is my wife," Lorenzo retorted, his voice shattering its carefully constructed calm, echoing like thunder through the vast space. "You placed her directly in the crosshairs of the Russian Bratva because your pride prevented you from asking for help." I took a deliberate step forward, aware of every weapon in the room silently aligning with my movement. "Where is Elena now, Marco?" His eyes, wide and pleading, locked onto mine, a maelstrom of desperation, grief, and dawning horror flickering within them. "Safe," he whispered, barely audible. "Martinez's team extracted her 3 hours ago. She remains unaware of your betrayal." "Good," I stated, my voice devoid of emotion. Then she will mourn a brother, not a traitor. Marco's eyes widened further, a flicker of profound shock crossing his bloodied face. He had undoubtedly anticipated a plea for clemency from the art teacher, a softening of Lorenzo's resolve through my supposed innocence. Instead, he met something far more formidable, far colder. He found a woman who now understood that love, in this brutal world, sometimes demanded the absolute willingness to eliminate any threat to its existence. "Valentina, please," he began to plead. "You betrayed my husband," I said, my voice, clear and unwavering, sliced through the tense silence of the warehouse. "You gambled with our marriage, our very lives, and our future, believing Lorenzo's loyalty was boundless. But there are lines, Marco, that even loyalty cannot bridge. Some betrayals are simply unforgivable." A flicker of something akin to pride registered in Lorenzo's eyes before he turned his unwavering attention back to Marco. "Any last words?" "Tell Elena. I'm sorry. Tell her I love her." "I will," Lorenzo promised, his voice flat. The gunshot exploded, a thunderous roar in the confined space, reverberating off the concrete walls and steel beams. Marco slumped forward, his body suddenly devoid of life. And with that single, decisive act, a painful chapter in Lorenzo's life was brought to an abrupt, definitive close. "Clean this up," Lorenzo commanded, holstering his weapon. "And send flowers to Elena. Anonymous, but expensive. She's lost enough." As we made our way back to the car, a profound realization of the gravity of what had just transpired washed over me. I had just witnessed my husband execute a man who had once been like a brother to him, yet I felt no trace of pity, no shadow of regret. Only a deep, abiding satisfaction that the threat had been unequivocally eliminated. "How do you feel?" Lorenzo asked, his voice a low rumble, as we settled into the plush leather of the back seat. "Like myself," I replied, and the words resonated with an undeniable truth. It was as if I had finally stepped into the person I was always meant to be. Lorenzo pulled me closer, his lips brushing softly against my temple. "Welcome to the family business, Mrs. Santangelo." Outside the warehouse, his men were already setting in motion the irreversible plan to permanently neutralize the cough threat. By morning, the Russian family would be nothing more than a chilling memory, another cautionary tale whispered about the devastating price of threatening Lorenzo Santangelo's wife. I closed my eyes, resting my head on his shoulder, and felt a complete, utter peace, a sensation I hadn't known since our wedding day. This was my life now, dangerous, undeniably violent, unforgiving to its enemies, yet fiercely, absolutely protective of its own. And I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. 2 years had passed since that night. I stood now in our magnificently renovated library, watching Lorenzo pace, a torrent of rapid-fire Italian spilling from his lips into the phone. The conversation was undeniably heated, circling around contested shipping routes and burgeoning territory disputes, but his voice resonated with the absolute authority of a man who had not merely consolidated, but utterly dominated his power. The room itself was a testament to our life together. Where once it had possessed a sterile grandeur, feeling more like a museum than a dwelling, it now truly felt like home. My vibrant paintings hung on the walls, harmoniously interspersed with the priceless art Lorenzo had inherited, and the massive, antique desk near the window was equally laden with his formidable business files and my array of art supplies. We had, in essence, blended our two disparate worlds into a singular, uniquely ours. "See to it, Capiscoco," Lorenzo commanded into the receiver, his free hand raking through his dark hair, a telltale sign of his vexation, yet underlying control. "Handle it and make sure they understand this is their only warning." He ended the call, and as his gaze met mine, his stern expression immediately softened, dissolving into a tender familiarity. 2 years of marriage had sharpened my ability to read every subtle micro-expression on his face. And right now, I could discern a fine tension etched around his eyes, signifying that someone had dared to cross a significant line. "Problems?" I asked, carefully setting down my paintbrush and giving him my undivided attention. Nothing I can't handle. The Torino family thinks they can expand into our territory while I'm distracted. He moved to stand behind my easel, his gaze thoughtfully studying the burgeoning seascape I'd been working on. They're wrong. Distracted by what? Lorenzo's hand settled gently on my shoulders, and I leaned back against his chest, savoring the solid warmth of him. By my beautiful wife and the wonderful news we received this morning. I smiled, my hand instinctively drifting to my still flat stomach, where our child was growing, a secret world of new life. We had only found out 3 days ago, and ever since, Lorenzo had been a captivating blend of fierce protectiveness and barely contained joy. You're not distracted, I corrected him softly. You're motivated. There's a difference. Is there? His lips brushed against my temple. Because I find myself thinking more about nursery colors than shipping manifests lately. The nursery can wait, I told him, a playful challenge in my voice. Your business can't. Lorenzo spun me around in his arms, his ice blue eyes intense, brimming with an emotion that captivated me. Do you know what you've given me, Valentina? What? A reason to build something that truly lasts. Before you, I was merely maintaining what my father had left me. Now, I am actively creating a legacy, a dynasty, for our children. Asterisk children, plural. Asterisk the very thought sent an exhilarating thrill through me. Just 2 short years ago, I had been a lonely art teacher burdened by a mountain of debt, with no family to call my own. Now, I was Valentina Santangelo, wife to one of New York's most powerful men, pregnant with his child, and actively helping him run an empire that spanned 3 states. Speaking of legacy, I said, reaching for a folder on my desk. I have some ideas about the community center project. Lorenzo's formidable expression shifted to one of amused indulgence. The community center had been my brainchild, a heartfelt endeavor to give back to the very neighborhoods where his businesses operated. It aimed to provide art classes and after-school programs for children who desperately needed a safe haven. It was completely legal, entirely legitimate, and unequivocally my domain. Tell me, he said, settling into the chair opposite my easel, ready to listen. I want to expand it. Not just 1 center, but 5 across the city. We'd offer art programs, music lessons, tutoring, sports leagues, everything these kids need to stay off the streets and out of trouble. And the budget? $2 million annually. I know it sounds like a lot, but... Done. I blinked, momentarily speechless. Just like that? Just like that, cara mia. If my wife wants to save the city's children through finger painting and violin lessons, she'll have whatever budget she needs. His smile was soft, radiating genuine affection. Besides, it's good for business. Communities that thrive are communities where we can operate without interference. This was the essence of how Lorenzo worked. Every decision, no matter how seemingly philanthropic, served multiple, calculated purposes. The community centers would undoubtedly help disadvantaged children, but they would also ingeniously cultivate goodwill and loyalty in the neighborhoods where his operations were based. It was brilliant, calculating, and utterly characteristic of him. There's something else, I continued, meeting his gaze. I want to hire some of the older kids as assistants. Pay them legitimate wages for legitimate work. Give them alternatives to working for families like mine. Lorenzo finished my thought, his own expression unreadable for a moment. Yes. He was quiet for a long moment, his intense gaze studying my face. You're trying to put me out of business, Mrs. Santangelo. I'm trying to make sure our child grows up in a world where they have choices, I replied, my voice firm. Real choices, not just the illusion of them. Lorenzo stood and moved to the grand window, looking out at the sprawling grounds where his men patrolled with their usual, unwavering vigilance. Do you know what my father told me before he died? What? that power isn't about how many people fear you. It's about how many people need you. The families that truly last are the ones that become indispensable to their communities. I joined him at the window, slipping my hand into his, my fingers intertwining with his strong ones. So, the community centers make us indispensable in a different way. Instead of controlling through fear, we control through dependence on our generosity. His thumb stroked gently across my knuckles, a subtle sign of his approval and admiration. You're more devious than I gave you credit for, cara mia. I learned from the best, I retorted with a confident smile. A soft, discreet knock interrupted our quiet moment. Maria appeared in the doorway, her customary efficiency tinged with a flicker of satisfaction that didn't escape my notice. The Torino situation has been resolved, she announced calmly. Mr. Martinez's team was very persuasive. Casualties? Lorenzo asked, his tone devoid of inflection. None on our side. The Torinos have agreed to withdraw from the disputed territories and pay restitution for their presumption. Good. And the Benedetti wedding this weekend? All arrangements confirmed. The family is honored by your attendance. I listened to this exchange with the practiced ease of someone who had learned, over time, to discern the potent meaning lurking beneath such polite euphemisms. The Torino situation had undoubtedly involved significant violence and intimidation, though likely not death. Lorenzo, I knew, had preferred to avoid unnecessary killing since our honeymoon. The Benedetti wedding was, of course, a business meeting deftly disguised as a social event, a crucial opportunity for Lorenzo to solidify alliances and unequivocally display his unwavering power. Will you need me there? I asked after Maria had discreetly exited. Always. You're my secret weapon at these things. It was true. Over the past 2 years, I had uncovered a natural talent for reading people, for intuitively knowing exactly what to say to put wives at ease while their husbands discussed illicit business with Lorenzo. The women from other families trusted me because I had once been an outsider, much like them, and they respected me because I had proven I could be as ruthless and unyielding as any of them when circumstances demanded it. What should I wear? I inquired, a hint of steel in my own voice. Something that unmistakably shows you're pregnant. I want everyone to see that the Sant'Angelo line is secured. The clinical, almost dispassionate way he articulated it might have stung me once. Now, I understood it implicitly as Lorenzo's profound way of expressing both pride and fierce protectiveness. In his world, every action was strategic, every word carefully chosen, but that didn't diminish the raw authenticity of his underlying emotions. My phone buzzed with an incoming text message. I glanced at it absently at first, then looked again, my blood running instantly cold. Lorenzo. Something in my voice, a sudden tremor or urgency, made him turn immediately, his entire body tensing, poised for readiness. What is it? I held up my phone, showing him the message from an unknown number, * congratulations on the pregnancy, Mrs. Sant'Angelo. It would be a shame if something happened to the little one. The air in the room seemed to drop by 20 degrees. Lorenzo's face went completely still, his eyes transforming into chips of Arctic ice. Maria, he roared, his voice carrying enough authority to summon half his security team. She appeared instantly, a blur of motion. Yes, sir? Code black. Lock down the estate. No one in or out without my personal authorization. Contact Martinez. I want every phone traced, every security system checked, every potential threat eliminated. Right away, sir. After Maria rushed out, Lorenzo turned back to me, his hands gently framing my face with infinite tenderness, despite the absolute fury burning like coals in his eyes. Listen to me very carefully, he said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. Nothing is going to happen to you or our child. Do you understand? Nothing. Who would dare threaten us directly? I whispered, my own fear tempered by a dawning rage. Someone with a death wish, he replied, his voice deadly calm, chillingly precise. But it doesn't matter who. By the end of the week, they'll be nothing more than a memory. I should have been terrified. Someone had just threatened my unborn child, brazenly invading the sanctuary of our home with their malice. But looking into Lorenzo's unyielding eyes, I felt only a cold, hard satisfaction that whoever had made this catastrophic mistake would soon learn the true, brutal price of threatening the Santangelo family. "What do you need me to do?" I asked, my voice steady. Lorenzo's expression shifted, a subtle, almost imperceptible smile playing at the corners of his mouth, a stark contrast to the dire circumstances. "I need you to be exactly who you are. The most dangerous woman in New York, disguised as an art teacher." "I'm not disguised as anything anymore," I stated firmly, my gaze locking with his. "I am Valentina Santangelo, your wife, the mother of your children, and anyone who threatens our family will learn why that's the most dangerous thing they could possibly do." Lorenzo kissed me then, hard and possessive, a kiss full of the profound love that had transformed us both from what we once were into what we were irrevocably meant to be together. Outside, his men were already implementing security protocols that would swiftly convert our sprawling home into an impenetrable fortress. Phone calls were being made, reaching allies and informants throughout the vast city. By morning, every criminal organization in New York would undoubtedly know that someone had foolishly declared war on the Santangelo family. It would be a very, very short war. As Lorenzo held me tightly against his chest, our unborn child safe between us, I reflected on how profoundly everything had changed since that pivotal night in the school bathroom. I had gone from being a woman with literally nothing to lose to being someone with absolutely everything to protect. And I would protect it all. With the same ruthless determination that had made Lorenzo the most feared man in the city, this marriage had stopped being merely a business arrangement long ago. Now, it was something far more powerful, far more absolute. It was love backed by absolute power. And there was nothing in the world more dangerous than that. Indeed, with a love so fiercely absolute, now intrinsically entwined with unbridled power, the very fabric of their world was destined for an irreversible transformation. Nothing, truly nothing, would ever be the same again, as their dangerous, formidable reign was poised to reshape destiny itself.